My life is good. R.I.P was hood. I might get to it. Not out the woods, so bro, I got to do it. Be a monster. That's why my mantra.
It's release time. The spring cleaning of WWE 2026 has occurred, and with it, some interesting stories, not just the people who were released, but also, is it ethical for Sean Ross Sapp to be the guy who is making the releases public before the talent themselves? And what is Triple H's role in the releases? So, because this has at least 3 subjects in it, I'm going to end up having to make its own video. I mean, I would willingly just put it onto SmackDown, but I got to make it separate because I got to go into other things. So let's take these things one at a time. First, April 24th, 2026 saw WWE do their yearly spring cleaning, which sometimes comes in 2 or 3 parts, but at least it came in 1 part so far. The number of talent that they have released is voluminous. We're going to start with the developmental talent, and then we'll move on to the main roster talent. The developmental talent: Luca Crucifino, Serena Linton, Malik Blade, Trill London, Tyra May Steele, Chris Island, Tyreek Igwe, and Tyson DuPont. So Luca Crucifino was a member of Tony D'Angelo's family. He was the suspicious lawyer character that was basically Tom from The Godfather. I like that character. They changed it to some kind of hippie guy collecting bracelets, and it's been garbage ever since. So him getting cut, I'm not surprised at all. Malik Blade has been in NXT forever. His partner quit like a year or 2 ago. I mean, it was kind of time. Trill London barely got started. I think he made Evolve like 2 or 3 times. You know, I don't know. Maybe they cut him a little too soon. Tyra May Steele, she is an Olympic gold medalist. You know, she won LFG. They pushed her quite a bit on NXT, gave up on that, put her on Evolve, pushed her there too, and then kind of gave up on that as well. This feels like they couldn't justify how much money they were paying her. So, I mean, it sucks that, they cut an Olympic gold medalist after only 2 years. You know, they should at least give her at least more time than that. But, hey, what can you do? Tyreek Igwe and Tyson DuPont, these were guys that they used as partners for Desmond Xavier when he was in WWE, when he was Wesley. They were his goons, but they haven't been used much since he got fired, or since he quit, or however that happened. They haven't been used much since then. So I'm not surprised that they got cut. So the Tyra May Steele was a big surprise because they made a big deal about signing her. But other than that, there was nothing of real value here. Trill London, I think, actually made it to the NFL, which I should have mentioned when I mentioned his name, but, things don't work out. So let's talk about the main roster talent. For starters, every member of the Wyatt Six has been fired. Uncle Howdy, that would be Bo Dallas, Nikki Cross, Dexter Lumis, Eric Rowan, and Joe Gacy. Look, I have hated the Wyatt Six. I don't think that it was a good gimmick. I don't think it was even a good idea, if we're being honest. I don't know if wrestling has ever had a tribute act before. And I'm not sure that people doing a rip-off version of what somebody else was doing, it really has never worked. The second Sin Cara didn't work. The new Midnight Express didn't work. The new Blackjacks didn't work. Trying to create new versions of things that previously existed, it doesn't work. Not in wrestling. I'm surprised to see how well the El Grande Americano thing is working. Well, it's only working in Mexico. If at some point, and then part of it is, not only is it not working, and I don't think it was a great idea, it seemed to be rudderless. There seemed to be no real purpose to it. And you look at how long they were around. The most fun thing they did was fight the Psycho Circus in AAA. And outside of that, I really didn't care about anything that they did. This forever feud with the MFTs, I was not a fan. I didn't like that. I thought it was terrible. And it went on for entirely too long. But it was very odd that they lost the feud. They ended up getting the lantern back, but they lost the feud. And that was sort of the door, that needed to be open for all of these people to be released. All of these folks are pretty old too. Bo Dallas has been in WWE since 2010. I think he signed alongside his brother. Of course, he's a former NXT champion. Has had other moves being made before. Nikki Cross has been in WWE a really long time. She had a hell of a run. Obviously, she was a superhero for a short time. Her best character was the crazy Nikki Cross from what group was that? What she was in? With Eric Young and the big bold or the big hairy guy, Killian Dane. I forget what the name of the group was, but that was her best run. That's when people really liked Nikki Cross and thought there was the most that they could get out of her. She's a former tag team champion. She won tag team titles, I believe. Was it Rhea Ripley she won tag team titles with? So the superhero character kind of derailed her career a lot, even though technically it was a success. She was a world champion, but it didn't take off in terms of merchandising and things like Vince had wanted it to. So she ended up being a heel superhero, which was very bizarre. Now, this happened before, I believe, The Boys became very popular. Just think about how it could have gone if The Boys or something like that had been on TV at the time. Then I think that Nikki Cross superhero character probably would have made a lot more sense. Eric Rowan was simply just brought back as part of the Bray Wyatt Tribute Act. They didn't really do anything with him outside of tag team stuff, and he barely did anything there. So, it's unfortunate. Dexter Lumis, he is an older guy, too. He was old when he got signed. His gimmick was mostly that he was a quiet serial killer. Obviously, the best part of the Dexter Lumis gimmick was when he got married to Indy Hartwell. Like, that was tremendous. That was absolutely fantastic. Outside of that, I don't know what else there has been for Dexter Lumis. He doesn't really fit this gimmick, but it seemed like they needed to rebrand him to get this gimmick to work, and that's what they decided to do. Joe Gacy is probably the youngest of the group. He was the one that could do a whole lot of... He could do the talking. He reminded me a lot of Kevin Owens. So the fact that WWE stuck him in this gimmick and then cut him, I don't see what else they could have done, if we're being honest. I'm not entirely sure what else there was for him to do, if we're being honest. So he's obviously he spent years as an indie wrestler that was doing garbage matches. He had a run as a top heel in NXT with that terrible feud with Braun Breaker. That was the worst thing he'd ever been a part of outside of the Wyatt Six. But I like the original concept of the Joe Gacy gimmick, which was an inversion of, the woke politics. He's sort of a woke cult leader. I like that idea. They gave up on it too soon, I think. So outside of the Wyatt Six, we also had Andre Chase, who was released. He should have been in a developmental portion. But Andre Chase has been in WWE a long time. He had a good run. He was never going to be main roster material. I was never really a fan, but I did find him entertaining as the Bobby Knight character in NXT, yelling at talent. I thought he was funny as being very delusional. I found him entertaining, but I didn't think he was main roster entertaining. So it was about time, I think. And plus, they hadn't been using him recently anyway. Dante Chen. Oh my goodness, he definitely should be in the developmental releases. Dante Chen has been in WWE for 5 years. For a comparison, that is almost the entire length of Stone Cold Steve Austin's WWE run. Remember, Stone Cold Steve Austin got brought in 1995, and he was pretty much retired by 2001. I think he officially retired in 2003. But that's about the length of the time Stone Cold Steve Austin was relevant. If you take out the injury time, right? If you take out the time Steve Austin was gone with his neck injury, it's about the same amount of time. It's about the same amount of time The Rock was around. Because The Rock got brought in 96. The Rock was pretty much, gone in 2002? So that's about, around the same amount of time. If you take out the time that The Rock was around for, I think he had chest surgery or something like that. Dante Chen's run is longer than the Ultimate Warrior. That's how bad this is. Okay, he has been around for a long time. He was a NXT 2.0 guy. He did nothing. They moved him from NXT to Evolve, bunch of stop starts, and never got anywhere. I'm surprised that this didn't happen sooner. Santos Escobar. This is an interesting case because Santos Escobar, they brought him back specifically for AAA. They tried to put him in a feud with El Hijo del Dr. Wagner Jr., and that seemingly went nowhere. He worked one main event, got hurt, and now he's gone again. They made a big deal about re-signing him, only to cut him a few months later. Wow. Santos Escobar is definitely a guy I thought that had a higher ceiling. I wish he had came to WWE when he was younger. He was over the age of 30 when they brought him in. I think he was over 35 when they brought him in. This was in 2021, maybe. No, he was in Black and Gold, so maybe 2019, 2020. Just unfortunate. Guy speaks perfect English. Guy speaks perfect Spanish. Would have been great for the AAA thing, and that seemingly is what they brought him in for. But he couldn't stay healthy, and he couldn't get over. That was the worst thing about it. It was just unfortunate he couldn't get over. Apollo Crews, they finally got him. They finally saw his name on the list. Everybody collectively wanted Apollo Crews' run to go on forever. A lot like the modern day JTG. We didn't want Apollo Crews to get the axe, but he finally got it. Look, Apollo Crews, he was there for a really long time. Okay? A really long time. Former Intercontinental Champion, former United States Champion, great guy, great talent. WWE never fully utilized him, I think. A part of the reason Apollo Crews never really got anywhere was, I think a lot of it has to do with the wrestling fans attacking him for the accent and going after him for having an accent. Oh, it's a fake accent. Even though they were doing it during like the Black Panther movie and stuff like that, they tried to make this like sort of heel Black Panther character. Great feud with Big E. I think he had a fun feud with the Hurt Business. Just a lot of stop starts. They seemingly wanted to do something with him and Matt Cardona, but it didn't work. So, I mean, we can't say this was a bad cut. He is definitely at the top of the list of guys who could go to AEW, fit right in, and be fine. If you want to mention anybody that should go to AEW, this is the first guy on the list that should be going to AEW. He'll be fine. Zoe Stark. Now, Zoe Stark is an interesting case because she's been hurt for a long time. She broke her leg in a match with Kairi Sane. She's a good mechanic, but not much else. She worked the indies for a long time. There was nothing particularly special about her outside of her athletic ability. She could actually make a pretty good star in AEW as well in their women's division, especially in their tag team or something like that. She has the work rate that AEW would be looking for. So I definitely think that she could make an impact in AEW where she wouldn't be expected to. Well, they don't really care about promos and abilities and stuff like that. So she could go in there, have good matches, and be just fine. She reminds me a whole lot of like a female Speedball Mike Bailey or something like that, where she moves very well, but people were never going to get behind her. Alba Fire, aka Kaylee Ray, she's been in WWE a long time too. She signed, I believe, in like 2019, maybe 2020. She was the longest reigning NXT UK Women's Champion before they closed that joint. A lot of that had to do with WWE closing NXT UK for a short time during the COVID. But she had a mediocre run in NXT and a mediocre run in the tag team in WWE and then a mediocre run as Chelsea Green's bodyguard. She's another good mechanic, but nothing major was coming out of her personality. She got a nice run, and now it's over. She's another one that could probably fit very well in TNA or AEW. And hopefully Zoe Stark and Alba Fire kill it in TNA, because in AEW they'll just be put on Ring of Honor or something. It may make more money, but they'll just get shifted to Ring of Honor because they're not huge personalities and they're not, guys have been on the indies forever. But Kaylee Ray probably of the two has the better opportunity to make a whole lot of opportunity for herself in AEW. Next, we got the Motor City Machine Guns. I'm going to be honest, WWE never should have hired these guys in the first place. They were a great tag team, but, they're essentially the same thing as the Young Bucks. I've never been a fan of the Motor City Machine Guns. I certainly wasn't a fan of WWE even bothering to sign them. They got the tag team titles, so they got that under their belt, but they never did anything major. No major storylines, no major matches of any description. They're going to go and have great matches with the Young Bucks and FTR and AEW, and then get relegated to Collision, because why not? But they're definitely going to be guys that are going to end up in AEW, and they should, because they fit that brand. So Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley will be just fine once this 90 days is over, or however long, 60 days, however long this contract thing is going to be. Now we get to the actual surprises, the things that made my eyes twitch a little bit. WWE released Zelina Vega and Aleister Black. I was shocked about this. Not just because Aleister Black and Zelina Aleister Black just returned not too long ago, but it seemed like they were actually doing something with them. This is the first time, outside of the Wyatt 6, where they were on TV regularly, but Aleister Black was on TV and factored in. Like, he was actually doing stuff. He has, been wrestling in top matches, and it seemed like they had a plan for him. And now they just rug pulled him, it seems. And it sucks. And a lot of AEW fans were making fun of him for getting fired. And then other people were saying that it was his wife that got cut, and then he quit alongside his wife, similar to the Karrion Kross situation. I'm not sure if that's true. There's a lot of fake news floating around, just like there was a lot of fake releases being floated around. And this is the worst thing about the bus flips, is that it's when you have these releases, not only do you have people pouring emotion about folks being cut, but then you have the fake cuts, and then you have people who are happy that certain people were cut. It's unfair, and I think it's absolutely childish and immature, and I see it all the time, and it's mostly AEW fans, obviously, that are saying that, oh, he burned his bridges with Tony, he burned his bridges with all these people, and it's like, how do you know that the bridge is burned? You don't know anything about these people. We don't know what was going on, and it still sucks that he was cut. Hopefully they can work something out and they can bring this guy back, and we won't have to. Now, Zelina, I don't know. Zelina had a hell of a run. She was a women's tag team champion, former Queen of the Ring, former United States champion, never really got over as a babyface. People saw them together as a ripoff of Cross and Scarlett, even though I wouldn't say that was the case, mainly because they all seem to be fitting in the same boat in terms of Aleister Black has been doing the dark thing forever, even before Karrion Kross was in WWE. Again, Aleister Black was doing the dark stuff before Kross was even in WWE. So they all they did was add Zelina to his gimmick. But whatever. But Zelina had a hell of a run. She could talk. The best run Zelina had in WWE obviously was when she was managing Andrade, but they dropped the ball with her. They dropped the ball with Aleister Black. I'm not sure at his age how many more chances he's going to get, but he's had a really interesting career where he tried to make the most of his time in AEW, and it seemed like there was no interest. There were some injuries, there were some slowdowns, some setbacks, but WWE, when he got back, it just never seemed to get any traction. Now we get to the one thing that made me say this is stupid. WWE fired Kairi Sane. This is the most mind-boggling release of this entire batch of releases. You can actually say, okay, Aleister Black, even though they were using him, it makes sense to cut a guy who he's older. There's not much you're going to get out of him, and unless he's going to be a world champion within the next couple of months, you probably got somebody in NXT that could do what he does. But Kairi Sane, she was not only utilized on TV, she was smack dab in the middle of a storyline with Asuka and Io that was actually a long-running story. You know, like this has been going on for months and it had no conclusion. Kairi Sane is a former tag team champion. She was an NXT champion in her first run. WWE never really let Kairi go in terms of letting her work as a solo. She was always a tag team with Asuka or a tag team with Io or something like that. We never really got to see what she could do individually. And it's sad because I thought we were finally going to get to that point. Or at least they could have ended the Kabuki Warrior storyline before they cut Kairi Sane or let her contract lapse. But this was mind blowing. This one was weird, you know. Now there was no releases that took place during this batch of releases so far that reaches the same level of when they fire Braun Strowman or when they fire Bray Wyatt. There was nothing on that level. Okay, so to TKO or Triple H's credit, they didn't go that deep into the bag and start firing main event talent, which is, you know, how sometimes these releases go, is that you start firing main eventers. Now, the question did come up, how does Triple H, how is he factored into these releases? Because before, everybody was saying it was Vince. You know, Vince would look into other people, you know, talk to the producers, talk to the agents, talk to various other folks, and they would suggest people to cut, and then Vince would just cut them. This is, you know, a story that came out with AJ Styles believing that Paul Heyman was behind the cut of the Good Brothers, even though everybody's like, it was Vince. They're like, yeah, clearly it was Vince, but somebody had to put their name on a list. You know, somebody had to put them, you know, in his crosshairs. So now the conversation is about, is Triple H making these cuts or is this TKO making these cuts? Who's making the cuts? I don't think it matters really because they're all on the same team. But when people say, look at the people who have been cut, Kairi Sane, Aleister Black, these are Triple H guys, you know, and some of these people, because they're Triple H guys, it has to be TKO making the cuts. So Dave Meltzer tries to explain this to certain people, and he says, nobody above Levesque is saying who to cut. Maybe Nick Khan, maybe not. Ari Emanuel isn't sitting there saying we have to fire Zelina and Kairi. By and large, the decision maker, for good or bad, here is Paul. It's like in other years where people blame the person or this person or that person when the division was 100% Vince. He continues by saying TKO is ordering who to cut. It is possible they got an unofficial salary cap and Levesque as the manager has to keep the number below that. Most likely the salary total would be a Khan decision. And as far as the key and personnel decisions, that's Levesque. Although Khan having input and others having input is likely. It's like Vince would consult with a few people, but in the end, it was Vince's call, not evil Jim Ross or evil Johnny Ace or evil J.J. Dillon. Now, it sounds reasonable, right? Because in athletics, that's how people make teams and get cut from teams, as they talk to the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and the head coach, and they all get together and they sit down and they make these personnel decisions. And WWE could quite frankly be the same thing. It's time for the yearly cuts. We need to get rid of some people. I don't believe at all that Mark Shapiro and Ari Emanuel are sitting down saying this person needs to go or that person needs to go. This is at one point in time where I'm actually going to agree with Dave Meltzer. This is a collective decision from the writing team, the producers, the agents, and Triple H. obviously Triple H is hiring people, so he's got to be the one that fires them. The person who is in charge of talent relations is obviously going to be the person who is in charge of the releases. Now, Zelina Vega says that she got the call from TKO, not necessarily from WWE. Now, if the cuts are being made without Triple H knowing, that's disastrous. But I don't think they would do that, okay? Because it affects the on-screen product, and it would affect the morale of the locker room, and it would seem arbitrary and coming completely out of nowhere. So I'm guessing it was going to be some kind of collaborative effort where Triple H likely sent a list of people that he no longer needs and says, I don't need these people, or they looking at the salaries, which I've always thought has been the reason that they cut folks, is they look at the salary. How much are we paying you versus how much are we getting back in merchandise and TV time and etc. And if those things don't match, or, you know, it's too much of a discrepancy in your favor, meaning we paying you a whole lot of money and you do nothing and we find nothing to do with you creatively, then we cut you. But cutting Kairi Sane in the middle of her story with Asuka and Io tells me that there might be somebody slightly above Triple H that are making the decisions. And maybe they're giving them a budget, saying this is your yearly budget. But if I had a yearly budget to cut talent, and I probably would not have, I probably would have cut most of the people that they did cut. So I'm not emotional about everybody who was fired. I don't see anybody other than Kairi and maybe Tyra May Steele, because she could have long-term potential, as being somebody that you need for your roster for the next year at least. Okay. Other than that, I really don't see the need for Apollo Crews or Santos Escobar or Morishita Machine. I just don't see it. Yes, you could have let their contracts expire naturally, but we don't know how long those contracts are. And a matter of fact, and we say this pretty much every year, there could have been more cuts. You know, I'm pretty sure I'm about to boot up SmackDown in a minute, because I'm recording this before I see SmackDown. And I'm going to see people on that show that say, why are they there? You know, I would rather have Apollo Crews than MFTs. Okay. I would rather have, you know, Aleister Black than most of the MFTs, or some other, maybe Matt Cardona and people like that. And you got to realize, if Triple H is given a budget for talent, and he went out and got all these Japanese guys and all these 40-year-old indie wrestlers like Cardona, cuts are inevitable. They're constantly signing people for NXT. They're about to bring in a new NXT crop. So obviously there were going to be cuts. It's inevitable that there needs to be rotation in talent. Now, you know, who gets cut is probably controversial, but the fact that these cuts exist, not only should we be used to it by now, but we also can just look and say, this is the 1 year that if this is the cuts of 2026 and there's not going to be any more, then this is the year where we say they nailed it. They actually didn't get anybody that pissed the fans off too much. Yes, Zelina cried on her show because, you know, WWE is her dream job, and she was fired once before and brought back, and maybe it could happen again. Who knows? But ultimately, these cuts are inevitable because WWE is constantly signing people, and they're constantly letting people's contracts expire, etc., etc. It's a necessity. It's part of the business. Now, speaking of Zelina and her crying on her stream, she was very upset with Sean Ross Sapp for releasing that she had been released before she did it herself. And other people are very upset that Fightful put behind paywalls all the people that WWE have been released. So if you want to know, you had to pay them to know. And I think WWE should release it themselves. You know, that's how I feel. Back in the day, that's how WWE would do it. They would put it on their own website that this guy had been released. That way, no dorks from the internet could fake it, could lie about it, or anything like that. That has been the thing that has really caused my ass to itch the most about these releases, is how many fake releases. People saying Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae had been fired. People saying Chelsea Green had been fired. I'm looking like, what the hell? Like, where's the official list? You know? And since WWE is not putting it out on their own site, people can lie and make shit up. But then they could also take away the wrestler and their opportunity to say goodbye on their own terms. And that's kind of how Zelina has approached this. Now, do I think Sean Ross Sapp did a bad thing? No, I don't. I think putting it behind a paywall is a little scummy, but his job is to report the news. If he got a list of people that was released from WWE and he's piecemeal putting it out, then that sucks. But I also disagree with the piecemeal of putting it out names one at a time. Apollo Crews has been released, and then 2 minutes later, Kairi Sane has been released. Like, come on. Just make a list and put it on your website and then tweet it out. These are the people that we're releasing this year, and their contracts will be up in 90 days, and they'll be free agents, you know, and yada, yada, yada. I don't see why you can't do that. That's how Real Sports does it, right? Real Sports, when they cut players, they cut them in bunches. And then they tell these people, these are the guys that we're waiving, that we're cutting from contracts, etc. There is no that punishing drip of releases. I have been complaining about the drip for like 2 or 3 years. We don't need you releasing people in drips and draps, okay? Just put out a list. All these people have been released. And then it's official because it comes from WWE. And then the talent can say whatever they want after that. But now some people are waiting for the talent to say, yes, I have been released. Other people are listening to Sean Ross Sapp. And it gets confusing. Like, I have not seen any confirmation that Kairi Sane was fired. And it put me in the same mindset as when I heard that Chelsea Green had been fired. And I also heard that Johnny Gargano had been fired. And I was like, wait a minute. So all the sites that I looked at said that Kairi Sane had been released. And since she has said nothing, I was like, I don't know if that's true or not. And the part of the reason why we don't know whether this stuff is true or not is because it's coming out from different directions and it's not coming from a central place. And maybe the reason WWE doesn't put out a list is because the talent want to make the announcement themselves. It's entirely possible. But I think they should take this away from the journalist class and put it out themselves. WWE should put out a list. Because I don't think Sean Ross Sapp is doing anything bad by saying, I got this information, let me put this information out there. There's nothing wrong with that. I think Zelina is just angry, you know. She's probably feels bad that, you know, they were working really hard and, you know, this happened to them. But it's not Sean Ross Sapp's fault. It's just, he's just making public the information that he received, you know. And apparently these talents were told maybe a few hours, maybe a day or two before they were released, that they had been released. So timing is another interesting thing. But I think that the biggest issue here is that WWE needs to have some balls and put it out themselves that they have cut talent. They need to announce, that's like they announced their signings in bunches. They need to announce their cuts in bunches. And save yourself the headache. All right, what do you guys think of all the releases? Who surprised you? Who didn't? Do you think Triple H is doing this, or is it the evil tiny hats above him? And is Sean Ross Sapp a bad guy for putting out these releases? Let me know in the comment section below. I'll talk to you guys later. Be blessed.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.